Hello, Gov Seekers. What is up? We are back. Slightly earlier time today. My name is Graham Elwood. We wanted to make sure we had time to do a Patreon bonus after this, so we're starting just a hair early. Speaking of Patreon bonuses, you can get this unique Government Secrets mug only at patreon.com/government secrets. It just tastes like truth. Like, share, subscribe. Because of our schedules, we're going to be doing this like every other week. So welcome to our bi-monthly Gov Seekingness. Here's a Bitcoin yo-yo. Just thought you needed to see that. Yo-yo to Bitcoin. All right, let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen. I just been recording a comedy Christmas album. Here we go. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Government Secrets episode 168 with the two most censored comedians in America, Lee Camp and Graham Elwood.
What's up, man? I heard the Fed is soon going to ban those yo-yos.
Yes, they're gonna come. I wouldn't be surprised. Now there's like any minute now, they're gonna just FBI is gonna kick in my door and take this yo-yo.
So I wanted to ask you, I don't know about you, but after seeing 3,000 pagers and devices explode spontaneously across Lebanon, I have switched to purely analog, carved out of wood sex toys. I'm not fucking around, man.
A lot to unpack there, Lee Camp. I mean,
because I had one of the talking ones, that's connected to Siri, and
I mean, the overall concern after what they did in Lebanon, I get, but now we're getting into what type of smart device dildos are you, like, what sort of sex toy are you using?
I had thought it was always good to use a smart dildo, but nope, it's clear dumb dildo's the way to go.
I mean, it's sort of the history of the dildos. They're pretty dumb. I mean, yeah. I saw that yesterday and I was like, maybe it's time to go get a home phone number again and just kind of get rid of computer technology and be done with it and just get like a phone book and send out like a paper newsletter to people and just call it a day.
I am honestly amazed that the Amish community has not been able to, take advantage of this and really grow their numbers. Like 38% of the United States becomes Amish or something.
It's going to happen, man. I mean, this is like, and of course, Israel just gets to do this completely unchecked. The United States is acting like we don't know what's going on. Like, oh boy.
Yeah. And someone posted, yeah, I know. I'm sure the US was told in advance. The New York Post's headline was something like 2,800 Hezbollah terrorists hit with exploding pagers or something like that. And it was like, oh, the people that were like innocently walking down the sidewalk, they're the terrorists in this headline. The people who did the bombing of 2,800 people, killing an 8-year-old girl and others, they're not the terrorists. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yes. And the 8-year-old girl had it coming?
She was absolutely a Hezbollah terrorist. Yeah, she was the vice president. It's
just like the 20,000 some dead Palestinian kids are all Hamas or something. Is that what the narrative is coming out of?
Absolutely. It is fucking insane on so many levels. Of course, it's horrific, but on top of that, it's like opened a whole new Pandora's box. If it can, apparently you're just allowed to blow up a whole society's devices, and this is like what? Okay, now we're just fine with this.
So imagine if it would have been the other way. Imagine if Hezbollah would have somehow blown up 3,000 Israeli pagers
Yeah.
It would be like, they're monsters, they're animals. And we'd all be like, you're not safe. And there'd be a whole thing of, get your terrorist safe smartphone today. You know, like it's.
And instead you're seeing the propaganda of like, this is the most precise and careful attack in military history, or like just insanity. Whereas if it were the reverse and Israelis had been hit, that you'd have Piers Morgan going, but can we just start off by agreeing there is nothing more revolting and disgusting that we have ever seen in the history of humankind than what Hezbollah did to those pagers.
Right. And also, what, a week ago, there's like confirmed footage that Israel killed its own people on October 7th. And why isn't that dominating the airwaves? Why aren't we discussing that there's like evidence of Israel shooting at its own people? Like where
I have been covering it for 11 months now. So I don't know if I count as dominating the airwaves, but
I hate to break it to you, Lee, you do not.
Damn it, Graham.
You and I are the antithesis of dominating any airways. We have been deliberately not dominated. We have been.
Yeah. No, it's this with so many things, as with like the truth about Nord Stream and stuff. It's like, at first they call us insane. Then there's a time where they try and get you to forget about it. And then slowly you see them acknowledging the reality here piecemeal. You know, I'm not saying they all do, but it's like ABC, Australia's main, news channel, did something on the Hannibal Directive a couple weeks ago, saying that Israel killed their own people. And of course that comes 10 months after independent media was covering it, but it's coming.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like, oh, you sound crazy. It's sort of it's an awful event, but it's not as global. But remember when Cat Williams
Graham has frozen
show, and he was talking about P. Diddy, and it's like, is Cat nuts? Is he crazy? I'm all right. You were frozen, but I was frozen for you.
You were frozen for me. Frozen? We can let the fans vote on who was really frozen, but
yeah, let's on a who was frozen. Let's get into a who was frozen debate.
Who was frozen worldwide versus who was frozen just for themselves.
Thank you, Kev75.
Yeah, thank you, Kev75, for the donation, for supporting the show. So sorry, I'm clicking at the same time as you. So I remember the Cat Williams interview. You're saying he went off at P. Diddy, and then
he said in that interview, I watched most of that interview. He said P. Diddy has been like saying, if you have sex with me, mainly like gay sex, if you let me, the way Cat Williams said, I got a virgin asshole. He was like, he was like, he said he walked away from
t-shirts.
Yeah. He said he walked away from $50 million. He goes, all these guys that are in P. Diddy's circle, they're all having sex with them. And it's, when you listen to it, you're like, Cat Williams sounds a little nuts. I mean, like, maybe this is true. And then now these indictments, and P. Diddy has been sex trafficking men and women, and he's just like horrible. And you're like, Cat Williams ain't so crazy now, is he?
There's a lot of the Cat Williams interview that people have been saying makes more sense than they realized.
Yes.
Alex, thank you for the donation. He says he's excited to be bummed out soon. Gov Seeks.
Before we get into our segment, speaking of bummed out, how about that debate, that Republican primary debate between two people that are both pro-fracking, both going to support the genocide, both pro-military, both pro-cop?
Hold on. Let's back up. You lost me. Are you saying there's not a great deal of difference between them?
No. Literally on their own policy, like Kamala, her policy. And then they clear, like Trump lies all the time. So they were really going to fact check him, but they didn't fact check Kamala, and she lied. I mean,
oh my God, ridiculously. But yeah, what I've found funny about the fact of how much they agree is Trump and Fox News, the kind of the Republican world, have had to invent fake stances for Kamala Harris in order to not say she's the same as him.
Right.
Because otherwise it's the goddamn same. So he has to be like, she's going to get rid of fracking. She's going to get rid of all the fracking. She's going to ban all the fracking. There is no, and as she says, there is no evidence she has ever done anything to remotely stop fracking, stop oil in any way. So that's one example. You know, he calls her a Marxist, a socialist. She's going to let all the immigrants in, even though Biden has deported more than Trump did. Like he has to invent fake leftist stances or left-wing slightly stances just so he has something to run against that isn't him.
Right. I know. She's a Marxist, and all of us were like, I wish she, you know, she's,
yeah.
The evidence, like you say, like, oh, I heard some conservatives say, she says she's pro-fracking, but she's not really, she's going to go against it. I go, no, she's absolutely pro-fracking. I go, how do I know this? She's the vice president of an administration that has signed more drilling permits on federal land than Trump did. So there's my evidence.
And also the fact that she was the tie-breaking vote on a bill that would have stopped fracking leases or backed off fracking leases. Yeah. She, like, rarely is there a senator or a vice president that has their vote makes the difference. And yet she had that vote. It was all up to her. And she made it so that fracking continued unabated.
It's why she's probably going to win, because she's the more palatable version of all of the awful stuff that Trump and the Republicans do. And that's what Obama was. Obama was just a nicely packaged, articulate, smart, to the right of Ronald Reagan, warmonger, like, and that's what she's going to do. And everyone, and white liberals, especially white liberal women, are going to go girl power. And then while Kamala is bombing the Middle East and setting people of color on fire.
Yeah, I know. It's nice to have that done by a woman for a change. You and I have talked about this before. It like having a vagina push that button to kill children. It just feels a lot better to me.
It does. So. Well, I know the people in the Middle East were they were relieved when they were getting bombed finally by a black man rather than a white man. Like that made it so much easier that their lives and their families and their communities and their resources were completely destroyed when Obama dropped more bombs than Bush. I mean, that was just fantastic.
And, I'm disgusted because I feel like it's affirmative action that allowed him to push that button, killing those kids. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the take on, that's the thing to argue about. That's fantastic.
That's the upsetting part of it.
Well, that's the other thing too. Like you watch that debate and it's just like the Republicans have to invent that she's a lefty Marxist crazy. That's just, she's going to take your guns. And that was the other thing. She's like, no, I'm not going to take your guns. I love guns. It was like, oh God, the Democrats have had this, like, we're going to do something about guns. And they never do it, but they've abandoned that.
They've abandoned the pretense. Yeah. Totally. They used to have we're going to do something about fracking and then never doing it.
Right.
Now, just, no. I love fracking. I don't even remember 2019 when I said I don't like it. I was out of my mind. Love fracking. It's the best. I mean,
like Trump had to invent this the military was in shambles when I took it over from Obama. Oh my God.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Yeah. Obama got budget increases every year.
Yeah. So is Biden, and yet Trump claims they've gutted the military. The military, they don't give any money to the military. The military has $1 trillion a year, and they don't know where 60% of it is going. Like,
yeah,
it's the most pathetic show. I mean,
it's a show. Like, it was a show. I was like, so Trump is taking like Republican criticisms of Democrats from like 40 years ago, like literally.
Yeah.
Like, and this is why America is so maddening, because both sides, the Trumper Republicans and the dumb liberal idiots, are so dumb and so misinformed, and they love being misinformed. And like college educated liberals think they're so much smarter. And they're like, the Trump people are a crazy, dumb cult. Yeah, they are. But then the college educated liberals, when you present them facts about, well, look how awful the Democrats are, they just kind of go, well, and then they
just go, well, it's not Trump though. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's like Jill Stein's VP candidate Butch Ware said on that radio show. He said, it's the difference between fascism and fascism.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
I know. It's just like the 2020 elections. I go, do you want the overt fascism of Donald Trump, or do you want the rainbow flag wrapped fascism of Kamala Harris? That's what you.
That's what you get. That's what we get every time. The imperialists win every goddamn time.
Yep. Yep.
That's why you got to vote yardrock2024.com.
Oh, buddy, I love it. I love Cornel West and I love Claudia Cruz and them. They're great. They just don't have the ballot access. They just don't have it. And so
yeah.
I'll vote
Jill
Stein.
And Stein is on, and like she's on the ballot in like 85% or something of it.
She's on enough states she has 496 electoral votes. That's how many states ballots she's on. So like theoretically she could win. And those other two don't even have a chance at winning, even though Jill Stein is a thought, 1,000,000 to 1 long shot, but she at least mathematically could win.
Yeah, I hate to break it to everybody. Jill Stein will not win, but that's kind of not the point. The point is that you shouldn't be voting for genocide. You shouldn't be supporting this shit show that is all theatrics. And I think Jill Stein and the other third-party candidates, what they do is they get ideas out there that are very important and have grown throughout our country, such as Medicare for All that came from the Green Party. And to me, that's the goal.
Well, it's also not voting is a mistake, because what needs to be shown is show the two parties, show the ruling elites this large number of people that went out of their way to not vote for these two corporate war criminal genocidal sociopaths.
Yeah. And in that regard, Sam Husseini reached out to me. He does great work as a journalist. He's usually the guy in the press room, like the State Department, where he asks a question and makes them look like idiots. He's usually that guy. Anytime you're sharing one of those clips, it's like 80% of the time it's him. Anyway, he reached out to me, and he's helped create a thing called Vote Pact, PACT, where if you are about to hold your nose and vote for Kamala Harris, and you have a friend who's voting for Donald Trump, basically you go in on a deal together to both vote for third party. And you're eliminating a vote from Kamala Harris, but you're eliminating an equal vote from Donald Trump. So it makes no difference for that race between Trump and Harris. You can't be accused of the bullshit about, oh, you're helping Trump or whatever. But it would if a lot of people did this, greatly increase the number of third-party votes. And that can make a difference. It can make a difference in terms of, like you said, the amount of the country that says we're not voting for this shit. It can make a difference in terms of if they get 5%, they are automatically on the ballot, I believe. A lot of differences that could be made. So it's an interesting concept. Now, here's the thing: is I was never going to vote for either of them anyway, so I can't be one of these people. But if you're one of those people that was going to hold your nose and vote Harris, then find a Trump supporter, make this deal with them.
Yeah. And also too, I always stress this: vote third party down ballot. That's really critical, because they can't stop get some third party people. I'm telling you, I would rather have a libertarian in office than a Democrat. And I
have a rock from my front yard in office.
Yes. Than a Democrat or Republican. I mean, any day of the week. I mean, even though there's so much about libertarian, I don't agree. I would rather have them in than the Democrats, because at least they're anti-war. At least they're like not paid by the oligarchs. So,
and pretty much any third party, at least to some degree, shows what these, like in a certain way, will show what a shit show the other two parties are.
They're great. They're great mirrors to go, this is how ugly these people really are. This is how awful their policies are. This is their history.
Yeah.
And they're both on the stage, both of them acting like, boy, when I get to power, it's going to be different. You were the president for 4 years, Trump, and Kamala, you're the second most powerful person in the world today, right now, today. You guys have had your chances, and you're acting like it's going to be so different when I get in there. Like,
yeah,
you're horrible.
Yeah, the Trump thing where he's like, man, if I get in there, then you were there. It was the same. It was the fucking same.
The same.
It, like, barely anything changed. You were slightly more incompetent, and your people below you were more incompetent at running the machinery of the state that is, committing all of these murders overseas and everything. A little more incompetent, but essentially the same, largest tax cut for billionaires. And that's kind of your big crowning achievement. And
yeah. All right. Why don't we do your segment first? It seems a lot of fun.
Oh, you want to actually do a show? Okay. So mine is about the myth of American meritocracy. This is one of these crowning myths of the United States, that we are this, other thing compared to other countries and things where anybody can achieve success. And there's a pretty good article. Some things I disagree with, for the most part, a pretty good article by Jeff Führer, which I think if your last name's Führer, you should probably change it. But and he put out a book about this as well. But there's kind of a million little side tracks you could get into on the myth of meritocracy. Maybe we'll mention some of them, but his is about kind of the broader idea of it rather than just picking apart each time that this is not a meritocracy in this country. Anyway, I'll read some of this article. From America's founding and before, false narratives about post-racism and meritocracy have been at play in our national identity. By the early 19th century, there was a general expectation that white men should and could successfully strive for self-mastery and improvement, that a hardworking, right-living youth could become a prosperous, self-made man. And I'm glad he threw in there white man. There was no, from our earliest days, there was no belief that if a woman just works hard enough, or if a black man just works hard enough, no, that wasn't even there. That we didn't even know the myth of meritocracy.
Yeah, we put it in writing that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
We just
no one was thinking, I guess that black guy didn't work hard enough.
Yeah. I was like, he has no chance to work hard enough.
Yeah, there was no chance. So this was specific to white men, that for white men from the beginning of the United States, it was like, if you just lived right and worked hard enough, you could achieve at least some level of wealth. To continue, implicit disapproval of the poor has an even longer history, rooted in debates over colonial poor laws. As a nation, we have absorbed and employed these narratives for generations. What the average person thought about individual achievement and opportunity at the beginning of the 19th century is difficult to say. What exists are the accounts of those who succeeded. Where have we heard that before? Those wealthy enough to have had political power and thus be included in the historical record. So basically, part of the myth of meritocracy comes from the fact that who writes the history books, but not even just the history books, who writes any of the books? It was the white men largely having some level of success. It was not the white man living under the bridge. His history book didn't make it to the canon that's handed to you in elementary school and middle school.
No, that history book that doesn't have Eugene Debs or Smedley Butler or Fred Hampton in it or Mother Jones or any of those people that did actual stuff.
Yeah. The poor don't write history books, and if they did, they're written on toilet paper, so no one wants them.
And activists are absolutely not allowed to write history books.
No. By the time observant foreign visitor Alexis de Tocqueville commented on American society in the 1830s, he could conclude that Americans' devotion to the ideal of free and equal society, quote, created the belief that anyone could get ahead. And while not everyone would succeed in doing so, this belief fostered an attitude that everyone should at least try. So it was this idea that was implanted even by the 1830s that, not everyone's going to be able to succeed, but most people, if you just work, you'll get it. The country was indeed more open then than now, at least for non-enslaved and non-indigenous people. Yeah, you kind of have to keep adding that caveat. It was more open if you weren't a slave, if you weren't indigenous, if you weren't a woman. Yeah.
Then it was great. Then it was a fantastic.
Then it was more open. It was a little more free. Following the American Revolution, as territory west of the Appalachians opened for settlement, there was simply more land available, even though much of it was already occupied by indigenous people. Yeah, that's another part of the myth of meritocracy, was that in the time when they were trying to steal all this land from the indigenous, they would often give white men like 100 acres or 160 acre parcels. Just like, if you're going to go out and live where those natives are, then here's loads of land. Like, so that feeds into the myth of, if you go to America, you can make it. They'll just give you 100 acres. Like, independence from Britain also released some Americans from hierarchical limits on work choices. An expanding world of commerce and manufacturing created new choices and opportunities for some. So part of this was the fact that in the United States, there was still a pretty entrenched caste system in Britain and other places. So many of those people in the lower caste who would never even be allowed to work certain kinds of jobs then go to the United States, and at least they've got the shot. Like, there's a shot there.
Right.
For some white men, there was an almost giddy sense of opportunity to improve, to rise, to achieve wealth and standing. De Tocqueville inferred that mid-19th century America's wealthy men were mostly self-made, observing in America most of the rich men were formerly poor. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that was his observation. Religion also...
But just be clear, even if that is true, the structure was set up to where only white men could do this. Now, yes, in that structure, if you went out west and busted your ass and risked life and limb, you could own land. And so that, like, that it makes sense. I always put it in this context. It's like, you and I, you know, if you're short, you're not playing in the NBA. If you're born 6'6", 6'7", and a gifted athlete, you have a shot.
You have a shot.
At making it in the NBA. But if you're not born that, forget it. You have no shot. You have no chance at all. So that's basically how that structure was set up. And so, yes, the guys in the NBA that have worked hard and did it, and they can say, I played with this guy and he was better than me, but I outworked him. Yes, but you were both born with this amazing advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this meritocracy for white males was.
Yes. And in the case of Shaq, it was like, how much do you have to fuck up to not be in the NBA?
Yeah, you're 7 feet tall and you're fast and strong, dude.
And you're 250 pounds. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you can palm a basketball really, like, and make it look like a grapefruit. If Shaq didn't make it in the NBA, he is like the world's biggest fuck up ever.
Yeah, yeah. So religion also bolstered economic striving throughout the 1800s. Russell Conwell, a Baptist minister who preached the same sermon over 6,000 times, reaching millions of listeners in the 19th century, he said, quote, "Never in the history of the world did a poor man without capital have such an opportunity to get rich quickly and honestly as he has now in our city. I say that you ought to get rich, and it is your duty to get rich. To make money honestly is to preach the gospel." Yes, it's just, the Lord is just all about you getting as wealthy as possible. And again, all of this, every last word of it, ignores the fact that you know, white men were whatever 15-20% of the population once you include slaves, women, and indigenous. So all of this is just directed at a tiny group of fairly small group of the population.
Right.
In many ways, our earlier national narrative echoed the rhetoric of the current one. Those whom we know about through remaining written record, white men, felt they had achieved much their own hard work. So you have white men with a certain amount of wealth writing all the books and all the pamphlets and all the newspapers and all the everythings. And those white people with a certain amount of wealth, with a certain amount of success to be writing those things, all thought they had gotten there with hard work.
Right.
Is that surprising? That they said, you know, this wasn't gifted to me at all. I've just been working very hard to get here.
Yeah, it's the old thing, like you were born on third base and you thought you hit a triple, you know?
Exactly. And, you know, again, this is not really what this article is addressing, but you could get into some of the details of how even today we are the myth of meritocracy. The quote I mentioned on here many times, or the study I mentioned on here many times, is that Black people are 50% less likely to get the first job interview just if they have a Black sounding name. Doesn't matter if the resumes are exactly identical. They're 50% less likely to get that first, just a foot in the door. Mm-hmm. And, yet we act like, oh no, everybody's got equal opportunity in this country to achieve, which is a load of massive horseshit.
Yeah. And now even this like very slanted, thing towards white males. And now, and in the last 50 years, you can say white women have been included in this. But even now, because of crushing capitalism, even now, it's even hard. Like if you work really hard now, it doesn't matter. Like you're still just crushed by the system where,
yeah.
Like,
well, and yeah, talk to the poor white guy who works all day at a fast food restaurant, then works 6 hours of the night driving Uber, and then sleeps for 3 hours and goes back to do it again. And he's been doing it for 10 years. Talk to him about how rich he's gotten with hard work. Like,
yeah, I know.
It's like, no.
Right. And that's the thing now, like the American dream, which was fabricated, as you're talking about, or it was created for just a small group of people. Even now it's gone for everybody. Like and yes, America there were immigrants of all different ethnicities that came to this country and did work hard and did achieve a level of success. That has happened. There is evidence of that. But even now, it's just like, even those like exceptions to the rule are hard, almost impossible to, like, it's so much harder now because rents are through the roof. Like all this, everything, everything is so expensive. You can't do it. Like I was surfing with a guy who grew up in Santa Monica. And he was saying, yeah, the crime is really bad. He goes, it's kind of like the 80s again, when the crime was really bad. I said, the difference is in the 80s, crime was bad in LA and there was gangs and stuff. The rents were cheap. Mm-hmm. The rents aren't cheap anymore. When I moved to LA in 95, right after the Northridge quake, the quake chased a lot of people out of here. There was still some gang stuff happening. So me and my buddies, we had a 2-bedroom, 2-bath in North Hollywood for $700 a month. Yeah. That same apartment is now probably $2,500.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I don't know if this rents has some other reasons behind it to some degree. Investment banking firms buying up all the houses and apartments and things like that. But much of this success, that the era we're talking about, the 1800s and early 1900s, where they were like, oh, if you're a white man and you work hard, you can achieve, at least middle class in this country of opportunity. Much of that time was a time in the United States when you, again, had tons of land, if you're genociding the indigenous, tons of material and minerals and materials and things you can extract oil, etc. And it was, in those terms, it was kind of a gold mine for the people willing to steal land and extract things. And now we're kind of past that. So the United States has gutted a lot of the rest of the world to some degree with slavery, with oil, etc. But that the time on the clock on the U.S. empire is waning, is almost out, and this is why you had this period where there was a real opportunity for white men in this country that was not being seen in a lot of other places.
Right. Yes. There was an opportunity here for white males that did not exist. If you were a poor person in Europe, you were stuck. That was it. You couldn't have upward mobility in your class if you were in Europe. If you were just a serf, you worked for the king or whatever, and that was it. There's nothing you could do. You couldn't own land. Here you could come, you could get land. You had to fight and claw and get it and work hard to have it, but you were at least given this little thin opportunity, and now there's not even that.
So to continue from this article, he says the older narrative, meaning the myth of meritocracy that was around in the 1800s, the older narrative doesn't recognize the people left behind during the great progress of the 19th century, the many failures that accompanied the few recorded successes. For example, the likelihood of business survival, even in that time, was very low. Businesses in many places had 1 in 3 chance of survival after just 3 years. The old narrative also ignores the indigenous people who suffered, yes, and in a rather glaring omission, nor does the story take account of the fate of the enslaved during this period. De Tocqueville reported that the 1830s Americans believed, quote, their chief business was to secure for themselves a government which will allow them to acquire the things they covet and which will not debar them from the peaceful enjoyment of those possessions which they have acquired. Government served best when it stayed out of the way of attainment, often stealing, if you're talking about land from the indigenous, etc. It did not get in the way of the attainment of the emerging American dream, except when it came to slaughtering the pesky indigenous people who inconveniently stood in the way of the attainment of the American dream. Wow. Attitudes towards the poor followed an ancient narrative which divided the destitute into the pitiful who deserved compassion and aid, and the indolent or vicious poor addicted to sloth and vice who deserved nothing but disdain. So I think we see a little bit less of this now, but back then there was a pretty strong, like, oh, well, you have the poor we should care about who are, actually incapable of working. And then you have all the poor we should not care about who are just lazy and they just suck. And we still have that latter one. Oh, the poor, don't give them money, they're lazy, they just need to work harder. We still have that one. I think we have less of the rich saying, well, there is a certain kind of poor we should take care of.
Yeah, it's funny too, like back then, even the like Rockefeller guys that were pretty brutal, they still had this like, well, and I don't know if it's because of their religious faith or whatever, but they still had this like, well, I have to build some schools and some hospitals. I'm going to put my name on them and have everybody worship me, and I have to give back to society. These billionaires today are just like, nope, you get nothing. You get
just to some degree. I will equivocate some of that. Like the Gates Foundation and Bezos has his thing are designed to like launder their image the same way like Carnegie and Rockefeller did some of that shit. So they do some of it. It depends. Right, Musk isn't doing shit, but
he doesn't care. But I mean, at least Carnegie and those guys, and again, they were pretty brutal and we've done segments on them. They at least said, I'm going to build something to make this city better. I'm going to put something, I'm going to build a train station. I'm going to build, a school, a library.
By the way, I want to just add a explainer in there in case people thought I was saying the Gates Foundation is good. No, the Gates Foundation is completely corrupt, disgusting, like world greed organization. However, it is an image laundering device where your average liberal thinks the Gates Foundation is doing good, and so they therefore think Bill Gates is doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and he's got ties to Epstein. That's why his wife left him. Anyway, he's doing good.
And still one of the most remarkable, I'm sure you covered it at the time, but I don't know if you remember it, considering how much various Epstein stuff you've covered. But one of the most remarkable interviews I've ever seen is Bill Gates on PBS, where she asks him about his meeting with Epstein, and he says, "Oh, a couple of dinners." And then she goes, "Well, it wasn't just a couple of dinners. You had dinner with him many times, and it was after he had already been convicted." And she pressures him just a little, and Bill Gates' response is, he goes, "Well, he's dead, so you got to be careful." And
yeah,
you're just like, what? That was your answer? What? Respond to having dinner with Epstein? Well, he's dead. What?
Yeah. I know. And is he afraid, or is he threatening her? I mean, was that a veiled threat at her?
It sounded like it could be threatening someone, or what?
Well, we could ask more questions, but it would be a shame if, you ended up hanging yourself with a paper t-shirt, when the camera goes bad. So,
even Benjamin Franklin wrote that, I think the best way of doing good to the poor is not making them easy in poverty, but leading or driving them out of it. Basically, he's saying, The best way to do good for poor people is to make poverty suck balls. Like, don't try and help them at all. Make it awful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Franklin. It's always nice to have a white man tell the poor how they should pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
A white guy born into privilege.
Yeah. As the question of who was therefore responsible for the relief of the poor, the answer then was the poor themselves. If they were able-bodied, and the community or state, if they were not able-bodied, was supposed to help them. So, and again, a lot of this is to justify wealth. It's like the wealthy should feel bad for all the poverty in this country because of the gut-wrenching inequality. But if you convince them, or if you promote the myth that, oh, those poor people aren't trying, they could all be rich, then the rich people don't have to feel bad.
Right. Somebody in the chat wrote, how did China pull 60 million people out of poverty in a single generation?
Not 60, 850 million people. Those are the actual numbers acknowledged by the UN and others. 850 million people pulled out of extreme poverty in like 30 years. In fact, people, this is kind of hilarious. People say, oh, capitalism is the best economic system. And one of the things they point to sometimes is they go, look at all the people that have been pulled out of poverty by capitalism over the past 40 years or whatever. And the number they point to is like 1 billion, meaning almost all of the people pulled out of poverty was actually by China.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, goodness.
So the myth, it continues, the myth runs deep in our history. Men can and should rise to success in this land of opportunity, and those who do not are to blame for their own failure. There was a time when the exceptions noted above, notwithstanding, the country was a little more open, provided more opportunity, and for those whose records remain, again, the wealthier white men were the ones creating the records, for those whose records remain, was perhaps more likely to reward individual effort with material success. The Republic's founding principles of liberty and equality, along with the Great Awakening's emphasis on individual achievement, harmonized well with the themes of opportunity, meritocracy, and self-determination. We carry these foundations with us today in the myth of equal opportunity, self-determination, and post-racial nation, as if we are. As descriptions of reality or determinants of social policy, they are all hopelessly misguided. And here's the last bit. It says, it simply cannot be right that a country as affluent and wealthy as ours leaves so many people hopelessly behind without any real opportunity to succeed. A narrative that accepts that to any degree seems cold-hearted, mean-spirited. Our country should be, at the very least, embarrassed by the results. Seeing the myth of meritocracy for what it is makes clear that the wealthy and powerful have constructed virtually all of this.
Yep.
So the origin story, the heart of America, giant falsehood.
Yet another big fat lie. That's segment number 1. Another America is nonsense. Well, I want to do, as we get ready for segment 2, we've talked a lot about CIA operations, obviously. And in those operations, we've talked about some of the CIA front. So I just wanted to look up and
finally, I knew if we did the show long enough, Graham would go after the CIA.
I was afraid to until now. I wanted to read off the majority of these front companies, which some of these I will absolutely spin into full segments, but I just wanted to read all of the fake companies that the CIA has. Now, we've talked about like Air America, right? We've talked about that. Last episode, we talked about, the CIA in Thailand. But these are all, you go to Wikipedia and it's just like a very lengthy list. So
even on Wikipedia, which is the liberal view of the world.
Right. The liberal, America's not that bad view of the world. Aerial contractors, right? That was in the United States. They are a private charter company, which was based in Smithfield, North Carolina, and was said by some to have provided discreet transport services for the CIA. Right? So that's the CIA operating in the United States, what they're technically not allowed to do. Air America, we talked about that. This was the passenger cargo airline in 1946 and covertly owned and operated by the CIA from 1950 to 1976. It supported covert operations in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War.
It is funny that Air America Radio Network, which was the liberal radio network for like 10 years or something, I think it lasted in the early 2000s, created Rachel Maddow and others. It is interesting they chose the name of a CIA-created airplane company.
Gee, that's weird. It's almost like they were deliberately trying to put out just a liberal propaganda arm.
Could be. Could be.
Maybe I'm wrong. There's Air Asia, which is they operate out of Taiwan, and they're owned by the Taiwan Airspace Corporation. There was the American Committee for Liberation of the Peoples of Russia, which was an organization that came about in 1950, and it was trying to abolish the Soviet Union.
Anything named like the liberation of and it's some U.S. enemy, some enemy of the U.S., then you just have to know. Yeah,
it's not good. They had a similar thing, the American Committee on United Europe, since Eastern Europe was part of the Soviet bloc, so they were and so there was that whole fight in Western Europe. Then there was Arizona Helicopters, was a helicopter contractor which opened in Laos in the early 1970s for the CIA. I gotta believe they're still operating. I bet you if you go to Laos or something, there's some like, hey, have a helicopter tour. And it's some Arizona helicopters. It's like, okay. Like there's no way, especially since we talked a little bit about this in the last episode, is the Golden Triangle which is Laos, Burma, and Vietnam, or and Thailand, which is where now it was the big heroin trade, and now it's where a lot of fentanyl is coming in. A lot of drugs that are coming into Thailand and the rest of Southeast Asia come through there right now today. So I find it hard to believe that the CIA is just like, hey man, we don't do any business over there anymore, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're just letting that go. There's
rarely do we walk away from things.
Yeah. This is my favorite, the Asia Foundation. It's a non-for-profit international development organization focused on improving lives across Asia. Let me read that again. This is a CIA fake nonprofit to try to undermine China. Did I read that? Let me read that again. Including governance, women's empowerment. Oh, these are just liberal buzzwords. Gender equality, inclusive economic growth. Bear in mind that, communist China and the Vietnamese, like, women had a pretty high position in those, like, some of the best snipers ever in any form of combat were like Vietnamese and Russian snipers. But anyway, this is Bird Air, which was an airline owned by the construction company Bird and Sons, which served Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. The Bone Om Airline, or BOA, was a Laotian Airlines run by the Prince. After 1965, BOA expanded using aircraft on loan from Continental Air Services, which is another CIA front.
Are there any airlines that are not CIA?
Probably Spirit Airlines.
I was going to say Spirit as well. I feel like the CIA has more funding than that.
Yeah, the CIA doesn't have time to charge you for $4 for a can of soda.
Yeah.
There's the Brewster Jennings and Associates was a front company set up in 1994 by the CIA as a cover for its officers. The most famous is Valerie Plame, a covert employee of the CIA whose then classified status was published in a syndicated newspaper. Like, it sounds like either a law firm or a marketing firm. Brewster Jennings and Associates, like, then there was Castle Bank and Trust, a Bahamian bank that was involved in tax evasion, as well as covertly funneling funds for the CIA. The bank was founded in the 1960s by Paul Hillwell, a former Office of Strategic Services, and which is the OSS. That was we've talked about this before. That was the spy arm during World War II that basically was created, was transformed into the CIA in 1947 after that that big military act that we've talked about. I forget. And this was a tax lawyer was also in this. Civil Air Transport was a nationalist Chinese airline later owned by the U.S. Central CIA that supported the U.S. covert operations during the Cold War.
Man, they love airlines.
They really love them. Committee on Correspondence. Oh, I love a vague, this could be anything. So we need a committee to talk about correspondence? Oh, all right. Was an American anti-communist women's organization active from 1959 to 1969. A group of women active in international affairs, voluntary clubs, and professional fields created the committee as a counterpart to the National Council on Women. Oh, God. This is so great.
Just helping the ladies.
Just helping the ladies. Any way we can help the ladies. There's we did a lot of stuff in Albania. So there's the Committee of the Mountains. Also, the National Committee of the Mountains was an Albanian anti-communist underground organization active in northern Mirdita region of the second half of the 1940s, created on the basis of the Mardita clan of Marcagione, associated with the Albanian leaders. There was a Congress of Cultural Freedom, which was formulated in West Berlin in 1950. The Continental, God, they love the airlines. You're right. The Continental Air Services, which was better known as the CASI, which we talked about, a subsidiary of Continental Airlines, set up to provide operations and support Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. So Continental Airlines was operated in the United States up until about 10 years or so, 15 years or so ago. And then they merged with United and then merged, and United, it's now called United Airlines. So to answer your question, yeah, it's only Spirit is the only one. Now this is before crypto currency was around. This was in 1952. Crypto AG was a Swiss company specializing in communications information, securely funded by Boris Hagelin in 1950. We mentioned his name before. The company was secretly purchased for US at $5.7 million and jointly owned by American Central, by the CIA, and a West German group. European Youth Campaign. Oh, this sounds great.
Youth that believed what?
Funded by the CIA, an American Committee on Uniting Europe. We talked about that was another anti-communist organization, and was created mainly in response to the counter-arm in Eastern Europe.
But they didn't have a lot of money for uniforms. So they just used the Hitler Youth uniforms.
Just take the swastika off and you put another thing on top of it, like a smiley face or something.
Yeah. Just put a smiley face.
What are those like truck stations that have like the chipmunk with the hat or whatever? They probably just put that one on there. It's an anti-communist chipmunk with a hat, so that made sense. I'll read a few more of these. There was another one. You're Evergreen. Oh God, I've seen these guys all throughout the Middle East. Evergreen was a charter and cargo organization based in McMinnville, Oregon, United States, wholly owned by Evergreen International Aviation, and has long-standing ties to the CIA. It operated contract freight services, offering charter and other services. When I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, you would see these Evergreen jets almost at every base.
Really?
Every base. And I'd be like, because you know, when you land on a military base, it's always you land on the tarmac and you walk downstairs. There's no like jet bridge or whatever. So go
ahead.
So you're walking across the runway basically.
Yeah.
And you're seeing all this aircraft. You're seeing all of this shit going on, you know, and every time I was like, there's Evergreen at every base. And I go, that has to be a CIA one.
And so I wonder if Evergreen is just straight up CIA or if it's CIA contractor, meaning they do other things other than just CIA stuff, but who knows?
Sure they do.
I'm not saying they're not CIA. I'm just saying some of these groups contract with CIA, you know, like,
right.
Like, you know, like Jackson Pollock and what's her name? Childs, the
Julia
cook.
Childs.
Julia Childs. They, you know, they were CIA, but they also like Jackson Pollock also took some time spooging on paintings. He didn't like. It was like the CIA was just a side thing he had.
A side hustle.
Side hustle.
It's like doing Uber Eats or something. Grubhub. Then we had, of course, we had Gloria Steinem. We've talked about her before. There was the Intermountain Aviation, also known as Intermountain Aviation or Intermountain Airways, a CIA airline front company, performed operations in CIA during the Vietnam War. National Committee for a Free Europe, obviously. The National Student Association was a confederation of college and university student governments in the United States, and it was operated from 1947 to 1978. And I'm sure that one has been shut down because they are just letting kids say whatever they, especially today, all of the kids organizing the Free Palestine protest, many of them.
They just let them protest.
Let them protest.
Yeah.
Right here at UCLA, there's more protests starting, and literally they're like writing laws saying you can't protest on UCLA's campus anymore.
Yeah, a lot of schools are passing laws like against chalking, against pamphlets. Like, I think you don't understand what the freedom of speech thing was. Like,
so I'm sure that program was shut down in 1978, like they said. I doubt there's CIA on campuses today. No way. America would never do that.
Well, with some of these things that the CIA, quote unquote, shuts down, like Project Mockingbird, it's because they just are the media now. They don't need to. Yeah. They don't need to like infiltrate the media.
Yeah, shut it down because we don't need to infiltrate. We run it all. We just control it.
Like if we make a phone call to CNN, they're not going to run a story. We don't need to infiltrate things.
Yeah, there's no. Mockingbird, you know what? Did a great job. Good work to the Mockingbird team.
Wash your hands of it. Turn the lights out. Lock up the doors. Because, we like the Mockingbird, we had to like sneak around. We had to be like, hey, I'm a regular journalist, see? And the fake mustaches and all that shit. Now, we're just sitting there with a badge that says CIA.
This is my favorite one. You'll love this one. St. Lucia Airlines. It was founded in 1975, and it does regular tourist flights and operated mainly to Martinique and Barbados, but also extended throughout the Caribbean and South America, and is a CIA front.
Nice. So is the reason all of them are airlines, is that because you're still at the A's part of this list? Are we just getting started on this list?
This segment could run on for days. No, it's all.
You're like, now into blueberry companies.
Yeah, there was a German magazine. The last one is Tepper Aviation, which was a privately held aviation company and fleet of Lockheed.
I guess I mean, there's multiple reasons that they're in so many airlines, but I guess part of it is in some countries, even allied countries, it's tough to operate a like foreign intelligence agency in that country. So the easiest thing to do is to be with a industry that is flying in and out all the time, I guess.
It's a great front because it's just like, oh, it's a cargo plane, or it's doing commercial flights. And so you can, if you control the airline, you can put whomever or whatever you want on that plane and get it in and out of the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, it's a bunch of guys with golf clubs coming off. All right, good. And it's all whatever surveillance, whatever it is, surveillance, torture equipment. So those are some of the fun CIA front organizations that I'm sure are not operating at all today, because the CIA is really pared down. It's got just a slim budget, and it's just barely getting by. And it's just trying to protect us.
Just a couple of guys. They have to steal paper clips from Office Max.
Yep. Just with a typewriter and a rotary phone, just barely getting by. So, all right, Lee Camp, where can people find you and see all of your exciting business that you're doing?
My exciting business is I live stream 4 days a week, all the other days of the week except today. You can go to leecamp.com, but I'm also on youtube.com/moment-of-clarity or rumble.com/leecamp. But yeah, you can find me at all the Lee Camp things. So
awesome. My comedy special, Manifested, is now available for wide release. It is on Amazon, Apple TV, Vimeo, and all over the place. So just look up Graham Elwood Manifested, and on the Comedy Dynamics YouTube channel. So support what I'm doing. And you can hear the audio tracks are now available on Spotify and Pandora and all that. So you can, if you just want to listen to the audio tracks of my album, it's now a video special and an audio album. So support what I'm doing.
All the bits where you're humping the mic stand don't come across as well, but everyone just know when you hear extended 3-minute long grunting, that's what's happening.
And just muffled mic, like then you hear it.
We're about to do an extra segment, folks, at patreon.com/government-secrets. And the moment you sign up there, you unlock 60-something extra segments that you can watch back to back to back till your eyes bleed.
Till your eyes bleed. You can go get a live one right now. So go to patreon.com/government-secrets. This has been Government Secrets episode 168. Another way America's been a lie, and the CIA loves flying.
All right. See you on Patreon.
Thanks, everybody.
Later.